Welcome to the Swing Trading with Cycles channel. It is December 30th. We're going to do in 2022. So we just completed the last trading day of the year of 2022. So next candle we get is going to be Tuesday, and that's going to be the first day of 2023. Right, and also obviously a new week and a new month. So very exciting stuff. We're going to look at crude oil today. We'll also WTI. We'll peek at Brent as well, although it's exactly the same pattern, just slightly different levels. And then we'll look at a few choice names as well. And so as I talked about in the last update, and if you take a look, I have a pinned comment that is going to have just a bunch of reference materials for you. So you'll see the playlist that has all of the crude oil updates, right? Videos, all of them automatically go into that playlist. And you can obviously look at that sorted by time to see the most recent one. So you can look at the video that I posted right before this. That helps you with some continuity. And there's also in there background on cycles analysis. The TLDR is it's all about price action. It's all about understanding the trend. And as a corollary to that, there's another playlist in there, 2 videos that help you that help you understand the mechanics of swing lows and swing highs. The TLDR there is a swing high is how a downtrend begins, and a swing low is how an uptrend begins. In a very real sense, the market just moves from swing low to swing high to swing low to swing high to swing low to swing high. Your job as an investor or trader, whatever you want to call yourself, I just call it someone that wants to make money in the market, is to buy after the swing lows and sell after the swing highs, right? And when I say sell, I mean potentially get out of the way, hedge if you're aggressive, short. So that's the quick preamble. It's all about trends because prices trend. They either trend or they move in a range. That's all they can do. And if they're trending, we want to understand in what direction and position ourselves. So this is our daily chart, crude oil, WTI. And we talked about this in the previous video. The daily cycle was looking a little murky. Potentially this was our daily cycle low here. Again, the daily cycle low is always going to be a swing low. And so in this case, this looked like it could be it. And then it was like, okay, wait, did we really just get only a 3-day rally? So the cycle only rallied for 3 days and then we've already made a lower low. Turns out it looks more likely that this is our daily cycle low. So that's December 9th. And so the last day of 2022, the last day of December was day 15. And these are always trading days. And so far the high of the cycle is day 11. And so we're going to need to make a high above that level, which is $81.14. And we'll look at that on the weekly chart. It'll be very clear why, we would expect some resistance there, some supply, if you will. But I mean, this bullish candle to close out Friday, to close the year, definitely you would all things being equal, this is a quote unquote bullish candle, right? One where probabilistically you're expecting a positive candle to follow, right? Something that looks like that maybe, right? To go get above here. Now that's going to be telling, and I mentioned this in the previous videos, as we get up into that $81, $82, $83 area, there's probably going to be a lot of supply there. It's going to be interesting to see. It's going to be important to see what price does. Like, does it actually go up here, like just blast through, or does it continue to pull back? Because you can see this candle, this high is at 81, right? And we got a pretty big pullback, and we know that because of this upper wick. Whenever you have an upper wick, it means there was a pretty strong pullback on a lower time frame. So that's the daily chart. And so that count puts us, that means Tuesday, first trading day of 2023 is going to be day 15 of the daily cycle. So we're going to be watching this closely. And what are the implications for the weekly cycle? And we'll talk about how we're thinking about this moving into 2023, since we obviously start that next week. So as we talked about in the previous video, a little bit murky. Is this actually our weekly cycle low here on week 34? Or is this week 10 of a new weekly cycle, right? That has topped out on week 6 potentially. What's most important is we're now in a little uptrend on the weekly chart, right? You can see these last 3 weeks, and this is your last week, bit of a doji, but it did make a higher high above the previous week. And that one made a higher high above that previous week. All that said, as we talked about in the previous video, we really need to get above the high of this candle here, this big bearish candle, right? And then eventually we'll need to get above this high. Like when you have this kind of cascade lower of selling, it suggests there's going to be more supply when price finally gets back up there. And so again, it's going to be important to see how it reacts. And you can see the high is exactly $82.75. So it makes sense we're going to see resistance all the way through that $80 to $83 area, I would say, more or less. And then it's going to be, and then once we get, if and when we get above here, it's a question of, okay, how do we behave within this range? Again, because that's going to be our next kind of hill to conquer. The high of this candle is 89.82, so call it $90. So what this means is that this is either week 13 or it's potentially actually week 3, right? So that because this was your low at $70.10, right? We did not make a lower low. So you definitely have the potential that this is your ICL here. And I'm inclined to think it is. Now, one of the things you'll hear, cycles folks talk about is needing to close above the 10-period moving average. In this case, we haven't done that yet, right? So we know for sure we have a DCL. That's quite clear. I mean, again, going back to the daily chart, this is a pretty clean uptrend. We cross above, we kind of backtest the 10-day moving average actually and come up roses, right? So, and because this looks like a strong uptrend, that's why I'm inclined to expect that we do make another higher high next week. That said, the broader market is in decline. Definitely want to take a look at the videos on that. Very clear sell signal. We're moving into a weekly cycle low for the broader market. So that's important, right? That we maybe just made a weekly cycle low for oil, but the broader market just made a weekly cycle top a few weeks ago. So that's you would think that the broader market would bring oil down, especially since the selling is probably related to recession fears, which can't be good for oil. All that to say, we're going to watch that, and that's why it's important to be able to laser focus on price action, because you don't necessarily get distracted by these other things. And so most likely this is actually week 3 of a new weekly cycle. But what the important thing is, where are we in the longer term cycle? Because we know this top here that happened in March, this was a long-term cycle top, right? We then have this double top here. We tried to rally back, didn't quite make it, and then we really started the flush lower. And so the question is, another way of saying that is, let's say this is a new weekly cycle. Let's game this out, right? And let's just say that it runs for 25 weeks, right? Let's just scenario plan that. And then we'll look at the daily cycles, because as I say, it's important to understand how the daily cycles and weekly cycles kind of intertwine. So that would take us to a low in late June, right? Well, actually call it early June, right? And now the question is then, is this going to be a left translated cycle or a right translated cycle? Meaning, is it going to rally for, right? Let's say if this is week 3, let's just do a quick scenario here. Is it going to do something like that and then drop into a low? Or is it going to be, more like something like that, and then we're going to make lower lows, right, as we drop into that cycle low? Or obviously there are other scenarios, but that's how you kind of think about it broadly. And if we think about a June ICL, let's think about what that would mean for the daily cycles. And these are kind of erratic. They can be kind of all over the place. But let's see, how many days would that take us to June? So that would be, I'm going to have to expand this here. So that's helpful. So just looking at that really quickly, it's telling us it's probably going to be multiple daily cycles. Okay, I have to expand this even more. That's interesting. Let's do that again. So takes us out to June. So that's 124 days. So that suggests to me you probably get 2 daily cycles out of this, maybe even 3, right? Let's say something that's 40-ish days. Yeah, maybe even something like that. And this is not a prediction by any means. I'm not even saying this is exactly what I expect. Just think about the way that could unfold. You could have, if it's going to be a bullish weekly cycle, then you're going to have this daily cycle is going to be right translated. So it's going to keep making higher highs. And then this is probably, well, that's where it gets a little, this could be left translated, or it could just wait to this one. But this would suggest, but then you think about the reverse. If it's a bearish scenario, then This is definitely going to be left translated, this one, and this one maybe ends up being as well, right? Because it's day 15, so maybe we get a top on like day 18, 19, and then we decline for like 20 days, and then and again, like the 40, like, because this can be kind of all over the place. Here we had a 40-day cycle, this was 30 days, then we can have some shorter ones, like this was 28. This was obviously really long at 54, but again, you could debate and say that this was actually your ICL. But it does seem like we're in, or I should say, we are in a downtrend on the higher time frame. So let's move on to the monthly chart, and then we'll look at XLE and maybe a few other ETFs. So again, as I said, that high back in March, that's this candle here. My God, what a bearish looking monthly candle this is. And you can see, just to like put a finer point on it, we consolidated inside the range of this candle for a few months, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I talk about this in my previous videos. And then we even back tested the lower end of that range. You notice that? Like, that's what these wicks are. These are back tests, right? Like, that's pretty incredible. You think about the way price respected that zone. I won't say the level to the tick by any means, but like just that zone, which is essentially the low of, again, of this candle, the March candle, which is 93.56. So we kind of tested it from the underside and then failed. Now this is really where it gets interesting. This is our December candle, also ends the year. And what does this look like to you? It's a setup for a swing low, right? We need to get above 83.32, which is the high of this candle. And once we do, and that's what this line is, right? And that's not exactly right coordinates, but like what you'd need to see is the January candle do something like this, right? Oh, let's draw that. Like, imagine your January candle does that, right? That's a swing low. That makes this a swing low and a potential long-term cycle low, right? So a top on month 23, and then the bottom on month, what, 24, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 30, 31, month 32. Now, because the commodity index looks like it's moving into a longer-term cycle low that may not be due until 2023, I'm inclined to think we probably are going to get another lower low here, or at the very least, a retest of this, some like choppy action. But at the end of the day, it's all about watching the price action. As you can see, as you'll see from previous videos, my expectation has always been somewhere in the 60s, right? Now that said, there's no reason why price has to do that. Price was going to do what it wants to do. Maybe this is our low. But again, maybe it's not, we don't have a rocket ship out of here. You know, there's some middle ground where we could just kind of consolidate down here for a little bit and not kind of have a V-shaped recovery, you know, just kind of taking back all these gains. So we're going to be watching pretty closely. What does the quarterly candle do? So the quarterly candle closes a huge doji. So next quarterly candle, the one that opens on Tuesday actually, is going to be an inside candle. A massive range for this candle of high of 93.73, a low of $70. So call it a $23 range. So on the higher time frames, we're going to just be consolidating, right? And so we're going to be looking for cues on those lower time frames and seeing how that sets us up for this time frame, right? If we get more bullish action on the weekly, then we get closer and closer to that 93.73 level. That means we're going to make a quarterly swing low. I hope you're understanding that. That monthly swing low would turn into a quarterly swing low if we can get above 93.73. That's how we would be forming a long-term bottom. That's how a long-term bottom forms. You get a swing low on a lower time frame. You get bullish follow through. It cascades to the higher time frames. Daily swing low turns into weekly swing low, turns into monthly, turns into quarterly. So we're going to be watching this one very closely. Now let's move on to XLE. And when we do that, I want to actually look at XLE versus oil, sort of a two-panel chart. Left-hand side of the chart on the left is oil itself. It's a weekly chart. The chart on the right is XLE. I've drawn this green line here right around where January starts. And I know that's somewhat arbitrary, especially on the chart. But you can see the picture is very clear. And we just talked about this, that oil made a cycle top in March, right? Let me actually make this not log, right? So cycle top in March, right? And since then, it's been declining. Now we had this little rally that ended up being a double top, right? So this kind of fake out and then a big decline took out all these lows. Look at what XLE has done, though. Again, XLE being the ETF for energy stocks. Just up, 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 and then a decline that did not make a lower low. So this was a lower high, to be fair, and it looked like we were about to start a downtrend, but then that was a fake out. Now, the problem here is this is a slight higher high. It is a high. This is a higher high than this, but it's very slight, so that doesn't look amazing. But the point is, I mean, if I just draw, like, just to be like super clear, we did this, 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 and then essentially this, right? Now, obviously, we had this little rally here, but if we're just kind of simplifying it, right? Whereas XLE did this, 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 that, and now is it going to do this? That's what we're going to see. But the point there is XLE has obviously just moved in a different direction than oil, and we're going to be watching to see, does that flip in 2023? Do we actually see oil start to move higher and XLE move lower because it's starting to run out of steam for its rally? That's where it's going to be very interesting to watch for that. This is the monthly view of that. And so let's jump into XLE with that said. Let's look at where it is in the cycles. Before we do that, we'll look at Brent really quickly. Again, same exact kind of idea. In the case of Brent, as we talked about in a previous video, it's a question of getting above 89, the 89.40 area, like this cluster of resistance on the weekly. So let's look at XLE. How are energy stocks looking? So let's think about the daily cycle first. So we talked about where oil is, and these certainly have not been moving in lockstep, oil and XLE in terms of their daily cycles. But clearly, this is a daily cycle low here. This is a very scary back test of that daily cycle low. Almost made a new low, but didn't. So this low here is 82.68, and that is 82.65. Yikes. Whoa. That was really close. So it literally came within 3 cents. So that's not exactly super bullish. Like, you don't love to see a retrace that deep, but it is what it is. It happened. And we have our high so far on day 11, and it's currently day 14. Right? So those are the numbers. And I think what you're going to see is that most energy stocks are doing something similar. And in this case, we did bottom essentially the same day, actually, because if you think about it, that means Tuesday is going to be day 15 for XLE, which is actually the same day for oil. So this is going to be interesting. And it's the same kind of idea. We would expect that we're going to at least test the cycle high. So in the case of XLE, that's the high from day 11, which is 88.36. And then, of course, see how price reacts once it gets there. So really the same principles for XLE as oil. But in this case, we had a very clear weekly cycle high on week 18. And it is starting to look like this big red candle is our ICL for week 21. So this would be similar to oil, and this idea that this is actually week 3 of a weekly cycle. So this actually might help clarify where oil sort of stands. The issue with XLE though is, I mean, and this is just an important thing to be aware of, right? Risk mitigation. It's rallied for 32 months, right? That was the top on month in November, right? So last month, November 2022, and so it's like generally after a really long rally, there's a pullback, right? Yet let's just look at for historical sake. Wow, right? That's a 70-month rally without a major pullback, actually. Yikes, that's interesting. So that's from August 2002 to the top in May 2008, and I'll maybe do a video where we go into a deeper look at this. That's really interesting because this was just many months of consolidation, but not huge downside before another move up. So that's an interesting fractal for this time around, right? Are we going to see something similar? Because what I'm saying here is rallying for 32 months is a really long time, and so you'd expect a long-term cycle decline at some point. But it could mean just kind of treading water, kind of like this, instead of a just total collapse before another run up. So this is going to be a really interesting one to watch. I think there's a lot of potential in energy just because of the potential fundamentals. I mean, it just seems obvious. But you don't want to rely on fundamentals alone. You want to make sure that you confirm, the asset is actually trending. And we'll look at just a few more names here. We'll look at Exxon. So you can see from previous videos, right? The expectation was I see the weekly cycle decline would continue. In this case, it hasn't. This makes it even more clear. We did have a so that's important. Like it's important to contextualize things, right? And with Exxon having this like really strong move out of the gate, I'm inclined to think this really bolsters the case that we are in week 3 of a new weekly cycle, right? Which again doesn't mean we're gonna rally for a lot of weeks, because we could have a left translated cycle, and we do still have a lot of upside resistance. But we're in a new weekly cycle, it would seem. Let's see, what about OIH? Yeah, same thing. So for OIH, the level to clear is 313. We're here at 304. And this is definitely one of the stronger ones. And the fundamentals, again, like these are the oil services names, tend to outperform. And what do we look? Yeah, so they're all doing a similar thing on the weekly, right? Around the day 15 range. Let's look at VLO. I like this one. It has, it's got a bit of a different. And when I comment on fundamentals, just know it's always anecdotal. This is a price action focused channel, so don't expect fundamentals. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep. So will be day 15 on Tuesday. So this is also a good example where looking at the relationship between a few different assets could help clarify what may be a sort of murky cycle. So I'm ready to actually change that, right? So like, or just update this. So that's an ICL on week 34 is what I would call. Now, again, doesn't mean it's bullish and we're out of the woods, but it does give you a framework for, kind of where we're going and some scenario planning. So that's good to see. So that's helpful, actually, as we're seeing, how the other charts are shaping up. Let's look at Devon. This one had been pretty bearish, and that hasn't changed, right? So, look at that. Okay, that's interesting. So Devon made its daily cycle low on December 20th. Nasty back test, just like XLE. So that's day 1, 2, 3, 4. So far, the high for Devon is day 4. Not a good sign. And again, we do expect these things to test their highs. So we'll see if this thing gets there too. We then had this pretty big swing high, and now this little bear flag looking thing here. So we first would need to get above 62.87, and then we can make a run for this high here. And that's 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's also not like, basically this one took longer to bottom, right? Whereas most other things are on day 15. This is on day 7. And one might say, oh, well, that's bullish, right? Because it's earlier in its daily cycle. Not necessarily if it's going to have a bearish cycle, right? So that's important. What about Phillips 66? Oh, this is an interesting kind of grindy action. This looks, I don't like the look of this, all right? I mean, look at that. This kind of looks like a bear flag, right? You expect something like that. But we don't go off of, like, and that's why I don't like this subjective patterns as much as, let's just see the price action, right? This is very clear that we need to make a move above there. Like, you can see that resistance, right? Like, we got to get above right around the 105 area approximately. And if you can see, if I can go back to Devon, the weekly chart, it's red for the week, which is not, like, you could see the other names, Exxon, XOP. Well, XOP is red too. XLE is barely red. VLO is green, or barely green, I should say. Conoco Phillips. So the ones that are red for the week, Marathon Oil also red for the week. That's also kind of telling you. I mean, look at this and look at this, Marathon Oil. So Marathon Oil is also underperforming. So day 1, 2, 3, 4. So two names to be sort of a little bit cautious of: Marathon Oil and Devon Energy for sure. What about Chevron? Now, like, look at those two charts. Oh man, look at this little grindy action, and then look at this. Like, which name would you rather be in? So 1, 2, 3, 4, nasty back test. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this is actually a little bit earlier in its daily cycle as well, not quite around the day 15 like most other things. But this is an interesting one, Chevron. A huge weight in the XLE. I think Chevron and Exxon make up, 30, 40% of that. So that's important to know about. And the other thing I would call out is that, let's see, for XLE, we'll just focus on that for a second. The way the monthly chart closed, it's going to open as an inside month in January. And so the low is 82.65. You want to know about that? You want to hold above that level for sure, and the high is 92.25. And you can do the same thing for all the other names. You know, just pull up a monthly chart, look at the range for December, and that'll tell you what we're going to open inside for January, and essentially the levels that we need to kind of obey. Otherwise, we may start a downtrend on higher time frames. So that's the picture for oil. We'll leave it at that for this video. I don't want this to get too long, but thank you for watching.